Alright, welcome back. In this video we're going to deal with the First Amendment, freedom of the press. Let's get right to it. So this should be a pretty painless video. Remember everything about freedom of speech and how the Supreme Court favors it whenever possible? Well, basically apply that same idea to freedom of the press. So freedom of the press allows you to use your speech on a wider scale, essentially, so that same principle will be there to protect you. Now the question is, what if the federal government wants to stop or block the publication of something that you want to say? They want to stop your freedom of the press. Are they allowed to do that? Well, that's exactly what happened in the early 1970s. We had a case called New York Times versus the US. And essentially what happened was the Nixon administration wanted to block the publication of the Pentagon Papers by the New York Times and the Washington Post. So essentially the really quick and short version of that is that the Pentagon Papers were leaked to those two newspapers, and they showed that the administration and past administrations hadn't been exactly forthright and honest, let's say, about the Vietnam War, and the Nixon administration thought this will be really bad for business, so we do not want this getting out there, and they claimed that national security was at stake, nation's morale for war, all that kind of stuff. So can they prevent the publication of those papers that they wanted to block? The Supreme Court emphatically ruled against the Nixon administration and in favor of the New York Times and Washington Post. What they said was that there is a heavy presumption against prior restraint. Prior restraint means rules of what can or cannot be published. So essentially it's censorship. So there is a heavy presumption against prior restraint or censorship even in matters of national security. So in this case, we can see how it's different, right, than Schenck versus U.S. In that one, in 1919, the Supreme Court was like, oh yeah, it's wartime, so we weren't going to defer to Congress and the president because they might need to make certain restrictions, and so they allowed speech to be limited in that case. In this one, national security did not help the Nixon administration. They could not make that same limitation. So again, we see here how the Supreme Court was ruling in favor of the freedom, in favor of the Bill of Rights. Alright, I promise that this one will be short, so that's it. Till next time, this has been a LaMoney production. You survived like the shortest video ever, so if you appreciate how short this was, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.